This is the Thrive Podcast with Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. And now, Pastor Fred Jeff Smith.
Hello, welcome to the Thrive Podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. I'm Fred Jeff Smith, pastor of Shiloh, and I'm very happy that you chose to either view or listen to this week's drop of the Thrive Podcast. We hope that you enjoy the Thrive Podcast. The numbers seem to indicate that we have good viewership, good listenership, and we are grateful to everyone for that. Drop us a line. Email me at fredjeffsmith@cox.net. And let us know what you think about this podcast, any of the previous podcasts, and how we can make it better. We'd love to hear from you. I'm very happy today to welcome a member of the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, a member of the United States military, a member of the Louisiana Bar, a lawyer, a former magistrate, Mr. Quintillis Lawrence. Quintillis, thank you so much for agreeing to come and share with us today and talk to us about a few things with regard to the law and how it affects things that are going on here.
Thank you for having me.
You are on the defense side.
That's correct.
Of law, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, a few weeks ago, I guess a couple of months ago, I had my sister on, Sansari Smith Clark, who works really both sides. Her official capacity is on the prosecutorial side, working for the AG's office.
Yes.
My sister and I are extremely close, and we have regular conversations, and whenever the law comes up, she ends up telling me I don't know anything at all. And that I sound like someone who has never taken a civics course in class. So let me ask you, as someone who works on the defense side, what do you see as the biggest problems that exist within the criminal justice system in the Baton Rouge community? Not nationally,
right,
in the Baton Rouge community. What do you see as the biggest drawbacks, the biggest problems within the criminal justice system?
Well, aside from those who are in positions to I'll say control, but to handle, and those of us who are in charge of the criminal justice system, both prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and alike, the biggest problem is not understanding that but for the grace of God, that could be us or our loved ones sitting in that defense chair. And we don't treat those people like they are people. And I think that some of the decisions that are made from that lack of understanding or that lack of knowledge.
When you say they don't treat them like they're people, could you elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
Well, this is my view of it, because I used to be a prosecutor.
Right.
I was a prosecutor for 3 years in New Orleans, and I was a prosecutor for the majority of my military career. And so I understand the prosecutorial perspective. But what happens is, it seems that the people who sit next to me, my defense clients, for everyone else but the defense attorney, it's just a piece of paper with some words on it that says that this person did something. It's not Sam, who's sitting next to me, who's someone's son, who's someone's father, who's someone's brother, who's someone's friend. The humanity is not, it seems to be lost in the paper that they have before them that says that he broke into a house, or that he stole something from Walmart, or whatever the crime may be that he's alleged to have committed. And it snapped at me for me when my son was born, that these are people's children.
Right.
There was a time when this man that sits next to me was crawling on the floor and reaching up to grandma, reaching up to his mama, and someone said, "I love my baby."
Right.
And now he sits here as an alleged criminal, as a defendant, and aside from his family that may or may not be there, no one seems to care about them. Me and my compatriots, the defense bar, are the only ones who seem to care about this person.
What happens in the minds of law enforcement, police officers, constables, sheriff's deputies? What happens in the process of their carrying out their duties that causes them to lose the perspective of the humanity of the person who's sitting next to you, the defendant?
I think they look at it as it's their job to clean up the streets, and they're not thinking about who this person is, that this is Miss Johnson's baby boy, that this is Miss Lawrence's baby boy, or whoever. They're just thinking, this person is alleged to have committed a crime, I'm going to take him to jail. And I think that, like I say, from the judges, the lawyers, some defense lawyers, prosecutors, it's just a piece of paper that with allegations on it. And that's what that entire case is about, as opposed to who this person is, what life, what promise this person may have in his or her life.
When you are introduced into the criminal justice system from the standpoint of being arrested and you become a defendant accused of various crimes, what is the first thing that I should do as someone who has been placed under arrest? Is the first thing I should do call my family? Is the first thing I should do call a defense attorney? What's the first thing I should do? They've come, they picked me up, they said that you're under arrest, they've read me my rights, they put me in the back of the car, they're taking me to detain me, either to parish prison or to the city jail downtown. What is it that I'm supposed to do in that circumstance?
Close your mouth.
Say nothing.
Say nothing.
Okay.
And the thing
so when
is,
they say you have the right to remain silent, believe them.
You have that right, and you should exercise that right. And it's not because they are trying to trick you into saying something, but normally it's because human nature. We think we can talk ourselves out of anything. Man, I was just over there. I was just over there trying to pick up my car because he took my car, and now you put yourself at the scene. So that's the first thing you've done. So just shut your mouth. Don't say anything. When they say you have the right to remain silent, exercise that right and remain silent.
And after you have done that, when you ask for your... Well, let me ask you this, because I watch a lot of television, and not everything that's on television is true. But I'm just curious. There was a television program that said that defendants have a right to more than one phone call, but in fact have a right to 3 phone calls. Is that accurate?
Well, there's nothing that I know of that discusses more than one phone call. Okay. Now, it depends on the sheriff who runs the jail. If he or she says that, hey, you can call your lawyer, you can call your mama, and you can call your pastor, those are your 3 phone calls. Okay. Those seem to be the most important 3 phone calls that one would make. Then maybe so. But most of the time, they just get that one phone call.
They just get the one.
They get that one phone call. And they call mama, and mama calls the lawyer. Mama calls the pastor. Pastor comes down, says a prayer with him. Lawyer comes out, tries to get him bonded out, or mama calls the bondsman.
Okay. And then from let's talk about bonding, because that seems to be a very hot topic.
It is
these days. Do you think that the bond process is a fair process?
One answer, no. Because $1,000 for Sam, who's not working, he's a high school senior or a college freshman, is totally unfair to him versus the $1,000 for Mr. Whittington, who owns 3 car lots, 3 storefronts that he's renting out, and 15 double shotgun houses. $1,000 is nothing for him. But what we in the system look at is we look at, okay, here is an offense that these 2 people are alleged to have committed.
Right.
And the going rate of the bond is $1,000. And so, no, it's not fair, because that high school, that college freshman can't afford that $1,000, whereas Mr. Whittington can afford the $1,000 15 times over.
One of the things that we regularly hear is that there are people who are being held in parish prison for extended periods of time, not because they've been convicted of anything, but simply because they can't afford to pay the bond.
That's correct.
They're in parish prison for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months at a time, waiting for their trial date to come up. And there doesn't seem to be any remedy for that situation?
Outside of getting a bond reduction or the judge looking at the case and saying, based on the fact that this individual cannot afford to pay a $50 bond, I'm going to give him a release on his own recognizance and associate the amount of that bond to his release. And if, in fact, he does violate his bond conditions or not show up to court and I revoke the bond, then it is him who owes the state of Louisiana that $1,500, that $1,000, or that amount. But we don't start there. We start with, you need to pay this cash bond, either through personal property, or cash, or bondsman.
And people are getting rich off of this. Because they charge these ridiculous amounts of interest on the money that you're borrowing to get your child out of jail. And more often than not, whoever put up the bond is incapable of paying what needs to be paid. It just seems like there has to be a better system than the one that currently exists, and it seems to disproportionately disadvantage the poor and the marginalized within our community.
Unfortunately, that's where the police officers feel that that's where they need to proactively patrol, where they term it high crime areas, because that's good police work.
What makes it a high crime area?
Well, for me, it's a perpetual. It's a wheel that constantly goes around. You deem it a high crime area because of the fights, maybe the arguments, the thefts, maybe the break-ins, and then you constantly go and patrol there. And so where you patrol, you're bound to find something. If I turn on the lights and look around my kitchen constantly, I'm bound to find something. There's a spider, there's an ant, there's going to be something because I'm going to constantly look for it. And that's the way I look at how they go and patrol in our neighborhoods. They're going to find something. You're going to see a guy who you want to approach and you're going to talk to him and you're going to find that he may have a controlled dangerous substance on him. Well, the same can be said if you go into the more affluent areas. If you patrol there, you will find crime there. So, unfortunately, that's why. Because the numbers say that it's a high crime area because the amount of arrests that they make in these areas.
If statistics show, as I believe they do, that people from affluent areas of the Baton Rouge area are guilty of drug crimes at the same rate that people from impoverished areas within the parish or within the general Baton Rouge area are guilty of drug crimes. It just might be different drugs that are involved. Then is it not incumbent upon law enforcement to at least be as aggressive in dealing with the affluent areas where drugs exist with the same level of zeal that they do with the impoverished areas?
Yes, you would think so. But those aren't the things that are driving the desire for the police to patrol the neighborhood. It's the other crimes, the shootings, it's the break-ins, those types of crimes, the property crimes, if you will, car break-ins, car thefts. So those are the crimes that drive that desire for them to place officers in those neighborhoods.
So in other words, if I need a fix, do they even say fix anymore? If I need some drugs and I don't have any money, and so I break into Mrs. Johnson's car because she left her purse in the car in order to take money out of her wallet to go buy drugs. You are more likely to catch me because I broke into the car than you are to catch me because I bought drugs.
That's correct.
Drugs are a byproduct of the break-in.
Yes, it is.
But if I live in an affluent neighborhood and I don't have to break into her car because I have money in the house and I can just go and buy the drugs that I want, then I'm less likely to be caught because I haven't been attached to a property crime.
That's correct.
So property crimes are the driving force behind law enforcement.
More so than the drug crimes. Now, the drug crimes come about because of the fact that the police are there and they end up arresting the individual with the drugs on them. So it ends up, they put all of those numbers into that pot to say this is a high crime area.
It's interesting you say that, because when I used to pastor up at Greater Mount Carmel, you were a member of Greater Mount Carmel in the time that I was there. There was a house 2 doors down from the back door of the church that everyone knew. We knew it at the church, and everybody in the neighborhood knew, was a drug house. They sold drugs right there in the house. The police knew it. The police station was 300 yards away from where the church was. Yes. And an interesting thing was, prostitutes would hang out on the corner at the back of the church, and folk would drive by and pick up the prostitutes. Prostitutes would do what they got to do and go about their business. We called the police and asked them to come out to move the prostitutes. The police officer who came out said, if you want to move the prostitutes, you got to move the drug house. He said, prostitution is not a sex crime. Prostitution is a drug crime. He says they're hanging out on the corner because the corner is close to where the drug house is. And they're going to do what they're going to do here, and then they're going to take the money and they're going to go buy the drugs. Interesting connection between these things. And it suggests that we are not really being effective in dealing with the root of the problem, but we're responding to symptoms of the problem that somebody thinks is important enough for you to mess with that in the poor neighborhood,
right?
But not in the more affluent areas of the city. I'm not excusing property crimes. I'm not excusing prostitution. I'm just saying that media would make it appear as though this is the only place where these things happen.
You're right. That's what gets the ratings. That's what gets the ratings. I mean, not that the media is the problem. The media does what they do. They sensationalize things so that people watch their show, whether it be local media, national media, radio, whatever the medium is. They're going to report it so that, hey, I need to watch this because they're talking about my city. And unfortunately, that's what they're showing. They're not showing that someone over here by the lakes was smoking whatever it was they were smoking, or popping whatever pills they were popping, or doing whatever they were doing, because one, it's not going to get any media attention unless Chris Nakamoto goes out and reports on it. Then it's a whole nother story. But for the most part, the media is not interested in the mundane everyday life of the affluent taking the drugs of their choice. Now, the individual who had to commit a crime in order to get the resources to pay for his drugs, now that's a story. And it's a person who we want to arrest. That's where the police are going to be.
When you say we want to arrest, what do you mean by that?
Not we, the police.
Right.
We, because we're the community.
Society.
Society, yes.
Yeah.
We want to arrest because it's causing ruckus in our neighborhood. You're breaking into Miss Johnson's car.
Right.
You done stole her purse. She had her medicine in there.
Right.
And also you can go get some drugs.
All of which is wrong.
All of which is wrong.
And all of which you should be prosecuted for. All I'm saying is, as you're prosecuting this crime, there are crimes over here that need to be prosecuted. Correct. As well. You work for the Public Defender's Office. Is the Public Defender's Office overwhelmed?
Overwhelmed. That's an understatement.
So, on average, how many cases does your office handle in a year?
The office as a whole, I wouldn't be able to speak to, but if on average, we in the sections, each of us, there's 3 lawyers in the section that I'm in, and we have on average about 150 open cases at any given time. And so if you take that and multiply it by 8, the 3 of us, I mean, you can get an idea of what those numbers are.
Goodness. So, how does it seem fair to the whole idea of innocent until proven guilty if your legal representation is so overwhelmed with cases that he can't give appropriate time to every individual case?
It's not at all. And it's a triage. It's a triage. It's an effort in triaging the cases. The murder is 9 times out of 10 going to get more attention than the theft from Walmart. While the theft from Walmart is just as important because his freedom, his clean record is on the line as much as the guy who's accused of murder. Now, the murderer is facing life imprisonment, but the guy over here who's accused of theft, he may never, ever get a job in his life because when he comes and says, hey, Reverend Smith, I want to work at Shiloh as your office manager back there with the tithes, that's probably not going to happen because he's a demonstrated thief by virtue of his record. So it's still important to make sure that he doesn't get penalized, or not penalized, but he doesn't get he gets the best treatment that he can as his representative, his defense counsel. So no, it's not fair at all.
So you've got the perpetrator, you've got law enforcement, you've got the prosecutor, you've got the defense attorney, and then you have the judge. Am I correct in saying that the judge is the referee?
That's what it is supposed to be. The judge is the referee. I think it was Justice Roberts who said the judge just calls balls and strikes. That's what they're supposed to do. They don't involve themselves in the strategy of the defense and the strategy of the prosecution. They answer issues on points of law. If I say judge objection calls for speculation, the judge rules on it based on what the law says the witness can answer. But they don't get involved in anything else. They're the referee. Pass interference, they call it.
Well, if the judge is the referee, and I guess I'm speaking optimistically and hypothetically, if the judge is the referee, does it make sense to you? And I'm asking you from the standpoint of your experience in law. Does it make sense to you that the referee is voted on by the people instead of appointed by the legislature or the governor or the mayor, depending upon what level of court you're talking about? It seems like it does. I don't get to vote for who referees my Cowboys games.
No,
because I would have certain folk
yes, you would.
Refereeing Cowboys games. So when judges have to run for office, like politicians, like the Metro Council or the mayor or the state legislature, does that not taint or shift the whole idea of an impartial, unbiased referee over legal proceedings? Well, or am I overstating it?
You're not overstating it because it only makes sense. Trust me, from Reverend Smith, from the time I realized that judges were elected, I struggled with whether or not just me, Quintillis K. Lawrence, would have rather seen the judges that deal with the cases that come before them if those judges were appointed or elected. And if it's a hodgepodge, maybe the governor appoints a panel and the people vote on that panel. But the Supreme Court has done, and the Office of Ethics have done and I air quote this, great job of ensuring that judges don't get into the melee of what other politicians get into. When judges or candidates are running for judge, they are obliged, they are required to conduct themselves by the judicial canons that judges are required to abide by. They can't comment on cases that may become before them, hypothets, things of that nature. So the only thing a candidate for judge can really do or say when he or she is running is that I'm smart, I know the law, I'll follow the law, I'll research the law, and I'll do things within the law, because that's their mandate, the law, nothing else. I hate it when I hear candidates or judges say, I'm tough on crime. I don't understand what tough on crime is, because everyone who's a prosecutor, who's a defense attorney, who's a citizen is tough on crime. No one wants crime. The defense attorneys that work in the public defender's office live in Baton Rouge. You think they want crime?
Yeah, but tough on crime is code. Tough on crime means
just like law and order.
That if I am convicted, I ain't gonna see the light of day again, or it's gonna be a very long time before I see the light of that's what tough on crime means.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the way when I hear a candidate for judge say, elect me because I'm tough on crime, that means that you're going to get the maximum sentence for the crime that you committed, regardless of the circumstances surrounding the commission of the crime.
Because it goes back to, like I said before, it's just a piece of paper with allegations, and if you did this, you're going away for the rest of your life, or as long as I can put you away. I'm going to hide you in the Department of Corrections, and they'll never find you. But that's the full circle. That's why I say that's the biggest problem, because you do have people who, it's just a job. There's no passion there. It's just, hey, I want to be this prosecutor, I want to be this defense attorney, I want to be this judge, and I care less about the people who come before me or who I have to deal with. So yes, I agree that language, it's that dog whistle that they speak of, the law and order, the tough on crime.
Right.
But judges, to answer your question, Reverend Smith, I'm still torn at the fact that judges have to be elected. But there have been some things that have been done to ensure that they don't act like politicians. To the extent that they say, I'm gonna do no new taxes, read my lips. There's none of that. There's none of that. They can't comment on hypotheticals when presented with them at debates and things of that nature. So I'm still torn with that.
Are judges subject to regular review? Is there an ethics board or some kind of review board that grades judges based upon their adherence to the law in the cases that come before them?
Well, when you say adherence to the law, you mean in following the law and ruling in accordance with how the law? Well, the Court of Appeals and the next appellate court, and then the federal courts of appeals.
But it requires a defense attorney to make such an appeal.
It does. It does. Someone has to say, I don't agree with your ruling, judge, and I want the next court above you to decide whether or not you were right or wrong.
And how often does that happen?
It happens pretty frequently, and in our office, because we tend to not necessarily at the end, because we don't deal with appeals, but we deal with writs. Those are reviews of the we call them interlocutory decisions. Those decisions that are not
word again. The
interlocutory.
Okay, and
those are the decisions like the denial of the motion to suppress.
Okay.
The granting of the motion to limit our witnesses' testimony. Things like that, the denial of the ability to present a piece of evidence on behalf of our client, those types of things. If the judge denies us what we're asking for, we can say, well, Judge, I want a writ, and we can get a day to come back, file that writ here in Baton Rouge with the 19th JDC at the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and then that judge panel will decide whether or not the judge that made the decision was right or wrong.
Okay.
So there's that.
If a judge is reversed 4 or 5 times over the span of 5 years, is that good, normal, bad? What is that? Is that about normal? I don't know anything about that.
Well, I'm not gonna shoot from the hip and say it's good, bad, or normal, because I mean sometimes you just get it wrong. I mean, a lot of cases come before these judges, especially here, where we have a robust docket in each court, both civil and criminal.
What a wonderful way of putting that, robust.
It is. We
are one of the most litigious places in the country.
Yes,
correct?
Yes, we are. That's why our insurance rates are high.
Remember that word, robust. We have a robust judicial system here.
But we so 5 would in a year's time frame. While I wouldn't say it's great, because after number 2, you would think that the judge would say, okay, wait a minute, let me take some time and look at what the law says on this issue before I make my ruling, and be a little bit more meticulous in his or her rulings. But some judges feel that they know what they need to know and they rule without looking at what has been given to us, which is all those books. We got a lot of books with a lot of law in it. It's all there for us to go look. It's no embarrassment with saying, hold on 1 second. I'm going to come back to you in a couple days and give you my ruling after looking at what the law says it should be. But
if I remember my basic civics, this is where me and my sister fall apart. If I remember my basic civics correctly, Louisiana is distinct from the rest of the nation with regard to the Napoleonic.
Correct.
And so there are differences in how the law is interpreted here versus other states in the country.
There are, but not really. See, what happens is Napoleonic Code means that we write our laws before we try to enforce any type of law.
Okay.
For instance, the common law, which came down from the king, they can say, and I like to give the example of spitting on the sidewalk. If spitting on the sidewalk in the common law was a crime, then if I went down the street and I spat on the driveway, not the sidewalk, then they could make a case showing that, wow, spitting on the sidewalk is the crime and spitting on the driveway is not a codified crime. One can say that spitting on the driveway is a crime based on the fact that it's the same concrete that the sidewalk is made of. Therefore, you're guilty of spitting on the driveway. Okay. Whereas here, we have to have a law that says spitting on the driveway is a crime. So if I go and spit on the street, it's not a crime because spitting on the street is not a crime. Well, then the next legislative session, they will make spitting on the street a crime. But that's the way the Napoleonic Code works. It has to be written and codified before we try to enforce any laws.
Wow.
And we do use different terminology for the same things that other states use. So. But that's the difference now. And most states are afraid to have lawyers deal with issues originating in Louisiana because they're afraid, oh, it's Louisiana Napoleonic Code. Like, for instance, as a JAG officer,
right,
we do legal assistance for our soldiers.
Right.
No matter where I go. If I go to Tennessee, legal assistance. If I go to Hawaii, legal assistance. If I'm in Germany, legal assistance. So if a soldier comes to me, or an airman, a marine, or a coastie comes to me and he's from Louisiana, then they want us to do the wills, where there is a requirement that our wills be a certain format, but there's no special wording that we use that other states don't use as it relates to bequeath and per stripes, and those words are the same across the board.
Okay.
Equally given to the children, bequeath, I give to upon my death. There's no difference, but people are afraid of our way of doing things. I mean, we're Louisiana, we are different. But yeah, there's the big differences were years ago, but nowadays we're more in line with what the rest of every other state is doing.
So what is the role of precedent in Louisiana judicial proceedings as opposed to others with regard to interpretation of the law?
Well, we use a term called jurisprudence constante as opposed to what this common law folks call stare decisis. It's basically using the cases that have come down to make a decision for the case that's before me. In this case, coming back to the spitting on the sidewalk concept, where the case law can say that the police officers had a right to arrest him for spitting on the concrete because on the driveway, because spitting on the sidewalk was a crime. However, spitting on the sidewalk on the driveway is not a crime. He was not wrong in arresting him. So they use that concept of jurisprudence constante to say that we look at our prior cases that have not been overruled to guide us in making our decisions today.
Are you happy about the change that's taken place with regard to unanimous juries?
Yes.
With what? Is it capital offenses or
it's all
offenses?
All offenses.
Okay.
See, because you had to have unanimous juries in the 6-person juries. Those crimes that had where the individual who is accused has a right to a jury of 6 persons. That's when the code article, the punishment says with or without hard labor. When the punishment is with or without hard labor. You got a 6-person jury. It has to be all 6. Well, the 12-person juries at hard labor, when the crime says you shall serve whatever number of years at hard labor. That's the 12-person jury.
Okay.
To include, of course, murder and first-degree murder, aggravated battery, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Those crimes required a 12-person jury and only needed 10 to say you're guilty. Well, now every crime requires unanimous jury to say you're guilty.
So, in your opinion, were majority decisions as opposed to unanimous decisions racially biased?
Well, unfortunately, the juries, black folk don't like to serve on juries because the common phraseology is, I don't like to judge. My Bible say I don't judge people. And I know you've heard it. I know you've heard it.
Okay.
And so we end up without people of color on the jury to start with, or with fewer people on the jury to start with.
Okay.
So when you start there, then you have an unfortunate bias racial makeup of the jury.
Yeah.
So, but as it relates to the people who are serving on the jury, to get 10, it's easy to get 10. I mean, it's easier to get 10 than to get 12. Let me put it that way.
It just seems to me that when you're talking about convicting someone and sending them away for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that there should be a certain degree of there should be an absolute.
There should be
involved in that. 12 people heard this case. 12 people saw it all the same way. When you say, well, 10 saw it this way, but 2 saw it the other way, and that's enough. To me, that's not enough to send somebody away for 25 years.
Not at all.
Of their lives. And I don't understand how that law. It was Louisiana and Oregon, I believe, that were the only two states that still had that. And now it's just Oregon. I don't see how that can exist anywhere and be considered just and right and fair.
You and me both. But we've made the move, and we're in the majority now. So,
and the law has already gone into effect?
It's gone into effect. Okay. But here's the unfortunate thing. For people who were sitting in jail and or on bond awaiting trial when the law took effect, they are still looking at a 10-2 jury.
So the old system was grandfathered in for those who were arrested.
Correct.
Before the change took place.
Before the change. So when the change took place, if you got arrested the day after, your jury must be unanimous. But the guy who was arrested 2 days before the law took place, his jury can be 10-2. Still not fair. But a lot of sausage making. I sit on the Louisiana Law Institute, and that's the legislative arm, a body that looks at the laws that are in effect currently and say, hey, legislature, these are the changes that we think may need to be made in order to adequately address the issues in our criminal justice system and in the other system, in the divorces,
right.
Litigation with car accident, personal injury, they look at everything. But they have different committees that look at those things individually, and then the entire body of the Law Institute looks at it collectively and make a decision as to what to recommend to the legislature. And so some of these things come through the legislative bodies, and you have representatives from the district attorney's office, you have representatives from the defense bar, you have representatives from the bench, you have representatives from every facet, you have the sheriff's office, every facet of the criminal justice system in there to say their piece on what they think should occur as it relates to the change or the proposed change in the law. So you can only imagine some of the conversations and some of the resistance there is to different changes that may occur in our law.
As the legislature is about to start, I believe it's early April, when they go into session, is there anything that you know of that's going to come up in this session of the legislature that we should be looking out for, watching to see how the legislature decides?
Not that I can speak of. I hate to say it, but I have not kept abreast of what bills will or have been pre-filed to make an educated statement on that. But I know some issues that we need to look at, and one of them I've spoken with a few legislators, and it's a concept called diminished capacity. Most of the legislatures that I speak with say it's just not going to happen here in Louisiana. We are resistant to that. And what diminished capacity is just what it is. It's the diminished capacity of the individual who's alleged to have committed the offense to basically, some would call it a technicality, but to not be held responsible for it because of his or her inability to truly understand what he or she was doing. Currently, our bar is way up there. It is either you were insane at the time of the offense, and it must be medically documented that you are insane. And that's the only way that you can be not held responsible for your actions. And we don't have the concept of diminished capacity. And we see every day people with a diminished capacity coming in there.
Louisiana does not have anything with regard to diminished capacity?
Nothing. Now, what we do have is if someone is sitting next to me as a defendant and he or she is unable to adequately understand the process, the procedure, who the judge is, what my job is as his attorney, what the prosecutor's job is as the state's attorney, what the people in the courtroom's job is, then he is deemed to be incompetent and unable to go forward at trial. And so they will send him back to the hospital, and if he's restored, his competency is restored, then he goes to trial. But as it relates to someone in that position who came to jail talking about, I just talked to John Kennedy and he told me, and I'm not talking about the senator, I'm talking about the president, and he told me that y'all don't know what y'all doing. Well, someone who really means that when they come in there and talk, they're not there. And they shouldn't be held responsible 100% for crimes that they may have committed.
You're describing a mental health issue.
I'm describing a mental health issue, a big issue in our city and in our state.
And in East Baton Rouge Parish, we just passed a tax.
That's right.
A mental health tax to provide adequate medical resources for those who are suffering with mental health issues. I'm curious to hear you say that we provided money to see about people with mental health issues, but that there's no provision in the law for people who have mental health issues.
Well, what it is it's that what's the word I'm looking for? It's the police officer comes upon this gentleman who they see or don't see has a mental health issue. They don't see it, they're going to take him to jail. Well, Judge Johnson has a pilot program currently operating where the individuals working with him in that pilot program look at these individuals and say, something's wrong, something is amiss. And so they get him or her treated, or they get him or her diagnosed, and they determine that this person has mental health issues. And so what happens is, if that person goes through some type of treatment, then it's possible that the district attorney may not charge him with the crimes. And that's a positive. That is a step in the right direction, and that's going to expand that type of program.
But it's law enforcement people that are making a mental health assessment.
Well,
as opposed to mental health people making a mental health assessment.
The people working with Judge Johnson are mental health caregivers.
Yeah, but this person has had to go through
to jail.
A process, a legal process, a law enforcement process before he ever gets, and he's fortunate if he gets a judge that has some concerns about his mental capacity, as opposed to another judge who might not have that concern at all.
Yeah. But what the tax is yet to be in fruition.
Oh,
we got a bill.
It was passed.
Yeah,
and right now there are questions swirling.
So it's just sitting
around how the tax is going to be implemented. We're a part of a group that's questioning exactly how the tax is going to be implemented. When you look at the board that was initially established to implement this mental health facility that they have attached to this tax. By the way, it was never in the proposal itself. It was a part of the media that said that all of this was going to go to the Bridge Center. But the proposal itself does not mention the Bridge Center at all. But initially, everyone that was on the board was a law enforcement person, the district attorney, the sheriff's office, the police chief, the constable's office. These are all law enforcement people, not mental health people. And now I'm hearing that there is no provision in Louisiana law for diminished capacity.
There is nothing. It will be the police officers who make the decision that, okay.
And what training have the police officers had to make that decision?
Well, I don't know what training they've had. I don't think that they've had that training. Otherwise, some of these things would have already occurred. It's easy to take a homeless guy who's out of his or her head and who's alleged to have entered or remained after being forbidden and take him to a homeless shelter and say, hey, this guy here was over here on Miss Johnson's yard. She told him to go 5 times. He continued to stay. He needs a place to stay tonight. It's easy for them to do that, as opposed to saying, let's take him over to Brigadier Isaac General Isaac's Drive and put him in prison. That's what they do. So the training seems to be non-existent. Because most of these individuals who we find who come through that, and those are the minute crimes, entering or remain after being forbidden, because they're just not there. They go and they end up going to jail and they get a bond of $1,000 or $500. He's homeless. You think he can make a $500 bond?
Yeah.
He can't make a $10 bond.
Yeah.
So the issues are just, they're rampant. They're rampant with our criminal justice system.
I know you. I know you as a husband, as a father, as a churchman, not just as an attorney and a representative of the United States military. How does your faith interact with your responsibilities as a lawyer, defense attorney, prosecutor, in whatever capacity in which you serve the law? How does your faith play a role in that?
Major role, because I look at everyone involved in the system, and I think, does anyone in here think when Jesus said, what you do to the least of your brothers, you do to me? Does anyone think that what I'm doing to this defendant, to this other lawyer, that it fits within that? Because it does. Because, I mean, he wouldn't have said it if he didn't mean it. And I just wonder, I mean, that's the thing that comes to mind more days than anything. And it plays a major part. Because while we have control of what we do, God gave us free will to do what it is that we do here on earth. But he also said that there's no way to the Father but by Jesus. And we act like he ain't coming back. We act like we got free reign of this world and ad infinitum. Tomorrow could be the day that he comes back, and I want to be somebody who he says, you know, my good and faithful servant, as opposed to depart from me, ye worker of iniquity, for I know you not. It plays a major role because we not just here doing what we want to do. We're supposed to be doing his bidding.
I recognize that there's supposed to be separation of church and state. I respect that, honestly, because I don't want the state to tell me how I must worship.
Right.
I'm always amused by these people who talk about they took prayer out of school. No, they did not.
No.
I prayed the whole time I was in school.
Right.
They never took prayer out of school. But I don't want the state to say that I have to pray a certain kind of way, or that I have to pray at a certain time,
right,
or that I have to pray to Yahweh or to Jesus, as opposed to the Jewish individual who prays to God but not to Jesus, or the Muslim who prays to Allah and not to Yahweh. I don't think that that's our role.
Correct.
I recognize the division between church and state, but from a spiritual perspective, not necessarily from a Christian perspective, from a spiritual perspective, where is the compassion that I think should exist in the enforcement of the law? I recognize that law enforcement people have an incredibly difficult job to do, a job that I would not want to do and am totally unqualified to do. So I'm not trying to put myself in the position of being able to Monday morning quarterback what law enforcement does. But so many times I just don't see a level of compassion for the extenuating circumstances that might have led to the commission of the crimes that a person is alleged to have done.
Right. Well, I'll say this, because I know a great deal of police officers here in New Orleans, and a lot of times because their job is so tough, they just don't concern themselves with that. It's the right here, right now. Because you hear a lot of the police officers or the police organizations or the police, I call them sympathizers, say, hey, blue lives matter too. Well, I'm just trying to get home. Yes, I want every police officer who goes out and does his tour of duty for the evening to get home to his or her family. Certainly. That is a fact. And I think that they put that before they put wondering whether or not this person here has mental illness, wondering whether or not this person has a place to stay tonight. Is that why he's stealing steak from Walmart? Is that why he's doing this or she's doing that? I think that is just a matter of self-preservation. As opposed to, because I know police officers who go to church, they're very, 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 very spiritual.
Several of them who members
right, here. But when they go out there on the streets, it's self-preservation. And I only say that because as a soldier, I mean, the game is I kill you before you kill me.
Right.
Police officer's game is not I kill you before you kill me.
Not.
Right. And that's where my problem comes with police organizations, and it's from the top, because if I can be trained to learn how to and I'm a lawyer for the Army.
Right.
I'm not a grunt. I'm not out there an 11 Bravo ground pounder.
Right.
But I know their job. And I know that they're trained, and every soldier in the United States Army is trained to learn how to de-escalate. If we learn that and we are trained to kill, because that's our job, and not be killed, how is it that they can't? And that's where I have my disconnect with them, because I know they're most of them good people. I mean, most of them they just want to get home to their families too.
Right.
But I think they put that before they put trying to discern whether or not this person has issues that he or she needs to be concerned about, outside of concerned about that they're going to attack me or going to do harm to me. But as it relates to saying, should I take him to prison because of his alleged commission of this offense, or should I try and work with him and determine whether or not there's some underlying issues that are affecting his ability to make decisions, or that are affecting his choices, the choices that he has made. So I don't think that there's a lack of spirituality and compassion. I think it's just not something that they concern themselves about on any given call. And that may sound. No,
I hear what you're saying. I guess, and I've never been in that position, so I'm speaking from a standpoint of ignorance, and I have to acknowledge that, because somebody's going to say, "You doggone right, you don't know what the hell you're talking about." But it just seems to me that to compartmentalize your faith and set it aside and put it in a room or in a closet and close the door and say, this part of my life is real and it's valid and it's valuable to me, except when I'm doing this job. I just don't know how you compartmentalize that way.
I don't know that they do that. I don't have an answer for that. I really don't have an answer for that, because I don't. Because again, just like the soldier, I mean, I know a lot of soldiers that they seem to do that because it's a I kill you before you kill me situation. And then they come back and to the base, and on Sunday they're in church and they're singing with the choir and the whole nine, and they're talking to the chaplain. And but when they're out there, they're I don't know. I think sometimes it's they're different from me. And so I don't have to treat them the same way I would treat someone else. And there's the human mind and the human emotions that people display in whatever job they're doing. It's weird. It's weird. So I don't know. I've never been a police officer. Never had a desire to be a police officer.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to speak for them. Now, lawyers, on the other hand, I don't know how it is that they do that, because they sit in a nice cushy chair and they, in the air-conditioned courtroom, you would think that they would be able to say, let me look at this person like a person. Let me put myself, let me put my child, let me put my cousin, uncle, mother, father, sister, brother in that person's shoes, and how would I want them to be treated. If you just do that, I think that your spirituality comes out, the compassion comes out, because that's a human being sitting over there, no matter what position in the courtroom you're sitting in, judge, prosecutor, or defense attorney. If you think the person's guilty, that's one thing, but still treat them with compassion.
In order to serve as a judge, whether you run for a judgeship or you're appointed for a judgeship, you have to reside within the community in which you serve. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In order to serve in the state legislature or on the Metro Council, if you're running for a certain district, you have to reside within that district.
That's right.
Why is it not incumbent upon law enforcement to reside within the community that they serve? I have a problem, and I have highlighted this ever since the Alton Sterling murder in 2016, and that's what it was. It was a murder. I'm a strong advocate for community policing. I do not understand their job. I don't pretend to understand their job. But I do know that you can't say that you have a vested interest in a community in which you do not reside.
That's true.
And Baton Rouge police officers are allowed to live outside of the city limits of Baton Rouge, outside the parish of East Baton Rouge. Some Baton Rouge police officers live as far away as Mississippi and carry their units, their police units, out there when they go home at night. Now, the argument from the union would be, what difference does it make where we reside? We're officers, we work the job, blah, blah, blah. But my point is, you have a different feeling about the job that you do if you're family, if you're a stakeholder in the community. And if I have to live in a community in order to serve as a judge, or in order to serve as a council member, or in order I can't live in New Orleans and be the mayor of Baton Rouge.
Nope, you sure can't.
But I can live in Mississippi. I can live in Centerville
and be a police
officer in Baton Rouge. That just doesn't seem right to me.
I agree. I feel the same way. I think that people tend to understand that they need to treat people a certain way when they are of those people.
Yeah.
And I agree 100%. I mean, they use arguments surrounding numbers. We can't find enough qualified candidates that live in the Baton Rouge area. We can't find enough qualified candidates that live in the parish or the city. And well, do something about it. You got all these blighted houses. Yeah. Create a program that says, if you want to be a Baton Rouge police officer, we will give you an incentive to purchase a blighted house. We will reduce the number of the points on the amateurs. We will do something to give you that house.
Absolutely.
And you can fix it up, and we'll give you tax breaks. Do something to get people to live in the community if you want them to be police officers in the community. I think now it's not the greatest of choices to use, but Detroit did the same thing. And while Detroit may be on the rebound at the time, they were at their lowest point. But they said, look, let's give police officers houses within the city, and portions of the city begin to spring back. So I agree.
And what a difference it makes if people see Baton Rouge police squads parked in the driveway.
That's correct. I know if I'm a criminal, I'm not going down that street to commit a crime. I'm not breaking in no cars because Officer Friendly lives right there.
Yeah.
He might come out, and that'll be the end of my freedom. I mean, it's common sense approach to things.
So if you really want to do something to take a bite out of crime, McGruff the crime dog, then perhaps the powers that be within our community, and the powers that be seem to be the Baton Rouge Area Foundation and the Baton Rouge Area Chamber of Commerce and lobby, business and industry, philanthropists ought to impose themselves upon the legislature for the state or the city council to say that something needs to be done, because it would take that kind of pressure from those kinds of groups in order to bring about the changes that need to be brought about.
I agree.
Currently, too much of law enforcement is in the hands of people who are not law enforcement administrators.
Else, right.
It was actually in the hands of the police union.
Yeah.
And the police union Bill of Rights, which gives police officers rights that nobody else has.
Right. I don't have them as a soldier. I'm just as responsible for my actions as a general is, as a private is. Everybody's equal. General, 4-star general, and no stripe private is as responsible for his or her actions as anyone else. Police officers get special treatment as it relates to whether or not they committed an offense while on duty versus if they committed an offense when they're not on duty. I mean, there are some instances where I understand that you have to look at whether or not the police officer was within his right to do certain things while on duty, but you don't give him any extra rights versus the rights of the citizen. I mean, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution was about all citizens. Well, minus a few, but we've been included thus far. But it was about all citizens, not all citizens, but the police get extra over here.
If I'm involved in a shooting,
Reverend Fred Jeff Smith.
Fred Jeff Smith gets involved in a shooting with Terrence Turner, producer of this podcast. And law enforcement comes out and says, we want a statement. I can't say, well, I've got 30 days in order to give you a formal statement. But a police officer can.
Right. Well,
if a police officer is involved in the shooting, he can take up to 30 days to make a formal statement with regard to the shooting. I don't have that right as a citizen, but the police officer has that right?
No. Now, I'll say this, just to be fair. You don't have that right as written anywhere, but you do have the right to not answer it until you speak with your lawyer. You can do that. Now, what will happen is, okay, sir, well, what we do have here, that's correct. You're going to jail. That's correct.
Tell your lawyer to meet us in Paris prison.
That is the difference. That is the difference. That is the difference.
Whereas
you will go to
the police
jail.
officer goes home tonight.
He goes home and he's on, most of the time, paid leave.
Administrative leave.
Right. And he's still getting paid, and you will be removed from your post as the pastor of Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church because you have been accused of shooting someone and you didn't give a statement, so you went to jail, and now you got to bond out and all that other good stuff that goes along with it. Whereas the police officer, whether he did it with malice or not, whether it was justified or not, he gets to say, well, you know what, 30 days and I'll come back and talk to you. He does not go to jail because it's presumed justified from the beginning, as opposed to looking at it and saying, hey, wait a minute. They can see all the things they want to see that says, hey, you shouldn't have shot him. But we're going to do an investigation and make sure that what we see is actually what we see.
What if I lie and say he shot at me first?
Well, then you get fired, and then you get forced to be rehired and get back pay, and then you can resign with a clean bill, with a clean record.
Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. I mean, we know that he lied. We know it. The chief said you should not be an employee here anymore because you're not upholding the values that we as police officers uphold. And then the union got him reinstated.
Interesting.
That's beyond me.
And this is a system that you want to be a part of.
That's right, because this has always been. People ask me all the time about, as a soldier, why you still in? Why you still in? And I tell them, well, because when I was a lieutenant and a captain, I was sitting there and I was listening to the major and the lieutenant colonel advise the general and advise the colonel on what he or she thought should happen, and I would be like, that's dumb. That should not be the case. Well, now I am the major. I get to tell the colonel, ma'am, this is what you should do. Mm-hmm. And while she doesn't have to listen to me, she does. She listens to me because I'm her legal advisor. I'm the only one. Mm-hmm. And so as I continue to move up in knowledge and in understanding of the system, I think I can make a difference inside the system. Because ain't nobody ever got anybody to turn the lights off outside the window, throwing rocks at it, saying, hey, you need to turn those lights off. It's too bright out here. But if I'm inside the house, I can say, man, it's too bright out there on them cats. Let me turn the light out.
Okay, now you're sounding like my father. Which is not a bad.
No, it's not at all. I'm flattered that you even said that.
Yeah.
But you, in order to make changes in a system, you got to be a part of that system.
Yeah. So, what are your future plans?
Well, I'm very interested in the possible run for judge. Again, can't make change unless you're a part of the system. Mm-hmm. And the change that I would make would be, I'll not be one of those that don't look at the law. All that law they give us, it won't go to waste.
Right.
You got to dog-ear those books and come back to them. You got to research. You got to write. You got to do those things to make sure you stay on top of what the law is, because the law does change. We see that within our conversation earlier about how the jury makeup changes, right, or the jury decisions change with a unanimous vote versus a 10-2 vote.
Right.
Some of the laws have changed as it relates to the punishment of certain crimes. In the Justice Reinvestment Act, they reduced the number of years that an individual is facing in some of the drug possession offenses. So if you don't know those things, you can't be effective in making decisions that don't get overturned. Mm-hmm. 5 in a year, 10 in a year. So that's my plan.
So there's city court, there's district court, there's state Supreme Court,
and in the middle of the district court is the Court of Appeals.
Court of Appeals.
There are 5 in the state of Louisiana.
Okay, so your future plans include running for which court?
District court.
District court.
Yes. Trial court.
And district court handles primarily what kinds of cases?
Well, here in Baton Rouge, the 19th JDC has bifurcated itself. So there are civil docket judges and criminal docket judges.
Okay.
I mean, in New Orleans, that's the only court in the state that is constitutionally separated, with the Orleans District Court and the civil district court and the Orleans Criminal District Court.
Right.
But here in Baton Rouge, the court took it upon themselves to say we want separate civil and separate criminal.
I see.
So I would rather a criminal docket because that's where my experience is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not too shy to take a civil docket either. I know I can handle a civil docket as well. It's law, and I did graduate law school, passed the bar, and I know where they keep that law at. They're not hiding it anywhere.
Yeah.
It's there. Everyone has Westlaw, LexisNexis, and it's rather easy to find out what the law is on a certain topic. It's not rocket science.
You're a father of 2 kids.
Yes.
A son and a daughter. 2 wonderful, very articulate,
Thank you.
well-spoken young people. I ask this question of all of my guests because I'm a native of Baton Rouge. I love my city. I don't think that it's perfect, but I do think that it's the greatest place in the world to live. Are you concerned about your children choosing to live here? Or let me ask it a different way. Would you want your children to make Baton Rouge their home?
That's a tough one, Reverend Smith. That is a tough one. I would, because we're here, and I would always want my children around me. But I want them to go where they're happy, too. I want them to go where they're happy. Jackson has already said he wants to go to Princeton, so he's not going to be in the South. All right, brother, that's where you want to go. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But
that's to go to school.
That's to go to school.
After he gets his degree. Do you think that there's anything in Baton Rouge that would draw Jackson back to Baton Rouge?
Brandy.
His mom.
His mama. My wife. Yes. No. Yeah. I think he would want to come back. I think he would. He's very family oriented. His family is extremely important to him. All he wants to do is hang around family. Sometimes he wants to hang with his friends, but like yesterday out of school, can I go to Leo's house, his cousin? Like, ask your Mimi if you can go to Leo's house. I'm at work, you at home with Mimi, so he went hanging out with Leo. So yeah, he'd come back.
Natalie?
I don't know about Natalie. She's different. She is different. She is different.
I ask this question because I worry about whether or not Baton Rouge has the economic infrastructure in order to attract a strong youth,
right?
A group of people who want to plant their flag here and raise their families here and help make it a better city. I see too much of a brain drain here, where kids graduate from high school and they go to Houston, to Dallas, to Austin, to Memphis, to Atlanta, and they never come back here. And I think that it does not bode well for our city that we lose too many of our young people. And so I'm just curious, but you're telling me that Princeton's going to get one of our best.
That's where he wants to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you chose to live in Baton Rouge. I'm glad that you and Brandy chose to raise your family in Baton Rouge, and I'm glad to have you as a part of Shiloh.
I love it. Love it.
We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. We'll be back next time.